This isn't Disneyland. Officer Scolds teens at horse guards. Tourists from all over the world wandered through the historic site, cameras in hand, capturing photos of the grand architecture and the soldiers standing motionless on their horses. The sound of hooves clopping against the cobblestones echoed in the air as the mounted guards maintained their steady pace, carrying out their ceremonial duties with the kind of discipline that had been practiced for centuries. The air smelled faintly of hay leather and the warm sun, a combination that reminded visitors that history was alive here, not frozen in a book. Among the crowd, a group of teenagers made their way into the parade with lively energy. Their laughter rang out, bright and careless, cutting through the calm that usually surrounded the guards. They were excited, buzzing with the kind of energy only teenagers could have, each trying to outdo the others in boldness and antics. They posed for photos, tried to mimic the stiff, upright stance of the guards, and whispered jokes to each other about looking official. Their phones clicked incessantly, capturing selfies and videos from every possible angle. Some even leaned a little too close to the horses, reaching out to touch the glossy, chestnut coats, unaware of the rules that governed this historic place. Nearby, tourists observed the teenagers with a mix of amusement and mild concern. Some took out their own cameras, not for selfies, but to capture the unusual sight of such playful chaos near the solemn guards. Parents with young children whispered warnings to their own kids, subtly gesturing for them to stay back. The older visitors shook their heads, muttering about the importance of respecting history. The atmosphere was a strange blend of excitement and tension, as the carefree energy of youth met the unyielding discipline of centuries-old tradition. The teenagers' antics grew bolder with every passing minute. One of them tried to mimic a salute, holding his arm stiffly in the air while the others laughed and filmed. Another stepped a little too close to a horse, his hand brushing against its side. The animal's ears twitched, and a low, warning neigh escaped its mouth. For the teenagers, it was funny. For the guards and onlookers, it was a signal that the situation could become dangerous very quickly. The mounted officers had long been trained to deal with disturbances, but even they could not allow reckless behavior to continue unchecked. As the group of teens continued, a mounted officer finally began to make his way toward them. He sat tall in his saddle, his uniform crisp and immaculate, the polished buttons reflecting the sunlight. The officer's expression was calm but firm, a silent warning that he would not tolerate any misbehavior. With slow, deliberate movements, he guided his horse closer to the group, careful not to startle the animals around him. Tourists paused to watch, sensing that something important was about to happen. The officer raised a hand, and the teenagers noticed him for the first time. Some froze, suddenly realizing that their playful gestures and close proximity to the horses had not gone unnoticed. Others tried to laugh it off, waving their arms as if to show they meant no harm. The officer spoke, his voice steady and commanding, reminding them politely but firmly that the guards were on duty and that the horses could be unpredictable if disturbed. He explained that touching the horses or getting too close was not allowed, emphasizing that the site was a place of tradition, discipline, and safety. For a moment, the teens looked at each other, their laughter fading as the officer's words sank in. Some whispered apologies under their breath, while others tried to playfully argue back, though their voices lacked conviction. The seriousness of the moment began to dawn on them, and the reality of the rules they had ignored became clear. The tourists around them nodded quietly, approving the officer's calm but authoritative approach. The scene was tense yet strangely captivating, like a real-life lesson unfolding in front of everyone's eyes. The officer continued, describing the role of the horse guards and the importance of their ceremonial duties. He told the teens about the history of the parade, about how the guards had stood in the same spot for generations, protecting traditions that were hundreds of years old. He mentioned the countless visitors who came each year, many from faraway countries, and how everyone needed to respect the guards and the horses alike. His words were not harsh or angry, but they carried weight, the kind of weight that only comes from experience, knowledge, and responsibility. As the teens listened, some began to understand. They noticed the stillness of the guards, the way the horses moved gracefully, and the unspoken bond between man and animal. The jokes and laughter that had filled the air moments ago began to fade, replaced by quiet reflection. The officer had not just scolded them. He had opened a small window into a world of history, tradition, and duty. The teens realized that they had been careless, treating a place of reverence like a playground. One of the younger teens, his cheeks flushed with embarrassment, finally stepped back, keeping a safe distance from the horse in front of him. Another whispered to a friend, "I didn't realize it was so serious here." Slowly, the group began to disperse slightly, giving space to the horses and guards. The officer remained nearby, observing without a word, ensuring that the lesson had been learned. The atmosphere shifted once more, from chaotic energy to a quiet appreciation of the scene around them. Even as the teens settled down, the crowd around them murmured softly. Tourists resumed their sightseeing, but many stole glances at the group, quietly approving the way the officer had handled the situation. Some parents used the moment as a teaching opportunity for their own children, pointing out the importance of respecting rules and traditions. For everyone watching, the incident had turned into an unexpected but valuable lesson about discipline, respect, and history. The sun continued to shine over Horse Guard's parade, casting a warm glow on the ancient stones and proud horses. The teenagers, now more subdued, wandered slowly, cameras still in hand but with a newfound awareness. Their laughter returned, quieter this time, as they whispered to each other about what had happened. They would remember the day, the feeling of being gently corrected by an officer, the sight of majestic horses standing tall, and the realization that history demanded respect. By the time the group left the immediate vicinity of the guards, the atmosphere had returned to its usual calm. Tourists continued to explore, and the mounted officers resumed their steady routines. The lesson had been delivered without drama or anger, yet it lingered in the minds of the teenagers, leaving a mark that was subtle but important. The encounter was more than a scolding. It was a moment where curiosity met discipline, and youthful energy was tempered by wisdom. As the afternoon wore on, the parade remained a symbol of history, tradition, and ceremony. The officer returned fully to his duties, his horse moving steadily along the cobblestones, while the teens drifted away, their laughter now tempered by respect. Visitors would continue to stream in, unaware of the small incident that had taken place, but the lesson would stay with the teenagers, shaping their understanding of respect, boundaries, and the living history around them. In the end, what seemed at first like a simple moment of teenage mischief had become a memorable encounter, one that balanced humor, caution, and education. The officer had managed to teach without anger, the teens had learned without fear, and the parade continued, undisturbed, carrying centuries of tradition into the present day. The teenagers had barely taken a few steps away from the main parade when the officer's presence lingered in their minds. The sun was still high, casting a golden glow over the cobblestones and the ceremonial horses, making the entire scene feel almost magical. Yet, attention had settled quietly around them. While they had been scolded, there was something about the officer's calm authority that demanded attention and respect. It was as if the air itself had changed. The energy of carefree mischief had been replaced by a more reflective awareness. The group clustered together, whispering among themselves. One of the older teens, a boy with tousled hair and a mischievous smile, tried to lighten the mood. "Well, that was a bit intense, wasn't it?" he said, nudging his friends playfully. But even he could feel the weight of what had just happened. Their laughter was quieter now, careful not to draw attention, as if the memory of the officer's words still hovered in the air. The lesson was sinking in slowly but surely. Nearby, other visitors continued to explore the parade, their footsteps echoing softly against the stone. Families wandered past, some with small children in tow, marveling at the majesty of the horses and the precision of the guards. Tourists snapped photographs, capturing moments that were both ordinary and extraordinary at the same time. In the midst of this, the teens realized how unaware they had been earlier, failing to notice the careful choreography and discipline that went into every movement of the guards and their mounts. One of the girls in the group, who had been taking selfies almost constantly, finally lowered her phone. She glanced at the horses, their coats shining like polished wood in the sunlight. Their ears twitched as they shifted slightly under the careful guidance of their riders. "They're amazing," she murmured, her voice softer than before. "I never really noticed how strong they look or how calm." The observation was met with nods from her friends, who were beginning to see the scene through a new lens. The boy with the tousled hair, still trying to make sense of the officer's scolding, asked quietly, "Do you think he gets annoyed a lot with tourists?" Another teen shrugged. "Maybe," she said, "but I think it's more than that. He's protecting them, the horses, I mean, and the rules. It's like he has to make sure no one messes it up." The group was slowly piecing together the importance of boundaries, safety, and respect, lessons that had been presented in a way neither harsh nor frightening, yet unforgettable. As they wandered, the teenagers began noticing small details they had missed before. The crispness of the guards' uniforms, the careful way they held the reins, the subtle communication between rider and horse, all of it spoke of training, patience, and pride. Every movement was deliberate, each posture controlled yet fluid. They began to understand that the parade was more than just a tourist attraction. It was a living tradition, a testament to dedication and discipline maintained over hundreds of years. Their curiosity grew, and the teens started asking each other questions quietly. "Do you think they train for years to stay that still?" one wondered. "How do they keep the horses so calm with so many people around?" These questions sparked conversations, and soon the group was walking more slowly, observing every detail. Their previous impatience had faded, replaced by a genuine interest in what was happening around them. For the first time, they were not just visitors. They were learners, taking in a history that lived and breathed before their eyes. Some tourists noticed the shift in the teenagers as well. A family standing nearby smiled, appreciating that even the young visitors were beginning to grasp the significance of the ceremonial guards. A mother whispered to her daughter, "See, sometimes rules aren't just for no reason, they're for respect and safety." The teen girls nodded, glancing back at the group and realizing that their own behavior had mirrored the curiosity and impulsiveness they were now cautioning their children against. It was a subtle ripple of awareness, spreading from one observer to another. Meanwhile, the officer continued his duties, riding slowly along the line of tourists and guards, ensuring that the rules were followed. From a distance, his presence was commanding yet unobtrusive, a steady figure maintaining order without needing to shout or act harshly. The teens watched him, noticing the careful attention he paid to every horse, every visitor, and every fellow officer. It was clear that his role required more than strength. It demanded focus, patience, and the ability to read situations as they unfolded. One of the boys, who had been quietly sketching in his notebook earlier, suddenly spoke up. "I think I get it now," he said. "It's not about being strict for no reason. It's about keeping everything balanced: people, horses, tradition, all of it." His friends paused, impressed by the insight. For a moment, there was silence as they each reflected on the observation. The casual fun they had been having before now seemed trivial compared to the responsibility and care involved in maintaining the parade. The group continued to wander, but with greater mindfulness. They made sure to keep a safe distance from the horses, stepping lightly on the cobblestones and speaking softly. Their phones, once held constantly, were now used sparingly, capturing only moments that seemed truly worthy of memory. Each teen had begun to appreciate the importance of observation over intrusion, learning that respect could coexist with curiosity. As they moved further along, the teens noticed something else: the subtle signals between guards and horses. A flick of the reins, a tilt of the head, a shift of weight, small gestures that communicated volumes. They realized that each rider and horse were partners, working together seamlessly. Without the officer's initial intervention, the teens might never have noticed these details. The experience had transformed a casual visit into a lesson about attention, patience, and understanding the deeper layers of a place that had stood for centuries. The sun climbed higher, making the parade shimmer with warmth. The teenagers, now quieter and more reflective, began to share their thoughts with each other. "I think I'll remember this for a long time," one girl said. "Not just the scolding, but everything we saw, the horses, the guards, how serious they are." Her friends nodded, each acknowledging the same feeling. It was a rare kind of learning, unplanned yet unforgettable, born from curiosity, a little mischief, and the guidance of someone who knew the value of rules and respect. Even the casual tourists began to take notice of the transformation. Some smiled, recognizing the shift in the teenagers' behavior. Others whispered to each other about the importance of having knowledgeable staff present at historical sites. The parade itself seemed to exude a sense of approval, as if the discipline and history embedded in its stones and horses acknowledged that the lesson had been absorbed. By now, the teens were moving almost silently, each step careful, each glance thoughtful. They were no longer just a group of playful visitors. They had become participants in a shared history, witnesses to a living tradition. The officer had faded slightly into the background, but his presence was still felt, a quiet reminder that discipline and respect were not optional, even in the midst of curiosity and fun. As the afternoon progressed, the teenagers found themselves naturally following the flow of the parade. They paused occasionally to watch the guards perform small maneuvers, noticing the precision of each movement. They observed how the horses responded to subtle commands, how the riders adjusted posture and position, and how the entire ceremony relied on a careful balance of focus and calm. It was mesmerizing, and the teens were captivated, not by the thrill of mischief, but by the elegance and order before them. Eventually, the group began to talk in whispers again, sharing reflections and impressions. "I never thought a place like this could be so alive," one of the boys said. "It's like the history is moving, not just sitting in a book." Another nodded. "And the officer, he didn't just scold us. He made us notice things we'd never even thought about." Their conversation flowed naturally, filled with curiosity, admiration, and a growing sense of responsibility. By the time the group reached the edge of the parade, the teens had learned far more than they had anticipated. The initial excitement, which had led to careless behavior, had been replaced by understanding, respect, and awareness. They now knew that history demanded attention, that tradition required care, and that rules existed not to restrict fun, but to protect everyone involved, including the horses, the guards, and themselves. The afternoon sun began its slow descent, casting long shadows across the parade. The teenagers lingered briefly, looking back at the guards and horses, absorbing the sights, sounds, and lessons of the day. They would leave the parade physically, but mentally, the experience had left a lasting impression. It was a moment of growth, a small but significant step in learning how to navigate the world with curiosity, respect, and responsibility. As they walked away, the officer returned fully to his duties, the rhythmic sound of hooves echoing behind him. The parade continued, unchanged in its purpose, but enriched by the small lesson it had delivered to a group of young visitors. The teenagers left, quietly sharing thoughts about what they had seen and learned, carrying with them a newfound appreciation for history, discipline, and the delicate balance of care that kept the parade alive and magnificent. The group of teenagers had wandered through the parade for some time, slowly learning to observe rather than interfere, but the memory of the officer's presence still lingered. At first, it was a distant thought, like the echo of a bell, but soon it returned more sharply. One of the younger teens, a girl with bright eyes and a camera dangling from her neck, glanced nervously at a horse as it shifted its weight. She remembered the officer's calm warning and realized that she had been reckless just moments ago. Her friends, too, exchanged uneasy glances, each silently acknowledging that they had tested boundaries they should never have crossed. As the group paused near the center of the parade, the mounted officer reappeared, moving with deliberate purpose. He had been observing from a distance, and now he was approaching with a measured pace. The officer's face was calm, but there was an unmistakable firmness in his expression, a signal that he would address the situation once and for all. Tourists nearby sensed the change in atmosphere and stopped to watch, their curiosity piqued by the arrival of the authoritative figure. The officer raised a hand in a subtle signal for the teens to stop. They froze, some instinctively stepping back from the horses, others instinctively lowering their phones. The air, which had been filled with quiet chatter and occasional laughter, now seemed charged with a quiet seriousness. The officer dismounted smoothly, his movements precise and controlled, demonstrating the discipline that was part of his daily routine. Even the horses, aware of his commands, remained perfectly still, their heads turning slightly as if to observe the unfolding scene. "Excuse me," the officer began, his voice calm but clear, carrying across the parade without needing to shout. "I need to speak with you all." The teens straightened, feeling a mixture of embarrassment and anticipation. They had expected perhaps a passing warning, but there was something in his tone that suggested this would be more than that. The officer gestured for them to gather closer, but in a respectful distance from the horses, emphasizing safety first. "You are standing in a place of tradition and duty," he said, his words deliberate and careful. "The guards you see here are on duty. They are not statues, they are not props, and they are certainly not part of a game. Each one of you must understand that approaching too closely or behaving carelessly puts you, others, and even the horses at risk." His eyes swept across the group, ensuring each teen understood that his message was serious. The officer's calm authority left no room for argument, and the teens were silent, absorbing every word. He continued, "This parade is not Disneyland. It is not a playground. It is a place where history, ceremony, and responsibility come together. For hundreds of years, people have stood in this very spot to uphold traditions that reflect the discipline and honor of those who serve. When you ignore the rules or act without thought, you are disrupting that balance and risking harm." There was a pause as the teens looked down at their feet, feeling the weight of his words. The magnitude of the situation began to sink in. One of the boys, who had been trying to make light of the earlier situation, finally spoke in a small voice. I didn't realize it was so serious." The officer nodded slightly, acknowledging the admission without anger. "I understand curiosity," he replied. "It is natural to want to explore and take photos, but respect is equally important. Understanding where the line is drawn and why it exists is part of learning, not just here, but in life." His words had a gentle firmness that struck a chord with the teens. They could feel that he was not scolding out of anger but teaching with the authority that comes from knowledge and experience. The officer took a step closer, his voice lowering slightly but carrying even more weight. "Imagine if one of the horses were startled. Imagine if someone slipped or stepped where they shouldn't. The consequences could be serious, even life-changing. Rules exist to protect everyone. When you act without thinking, You ignore the safety and the tradition that countless others before you have honored. I need you to understand that. The gravity of his words caused several of the teens to shiver slightly. They began to realize that their earlier behavior could have led to accidents that were avoidable, yet entirely possible. The officer then moved around the group, pointing to small details that the teens had overlooked in their excitement. Notice the horse's posture, the guard's stance, the precision of each movement. This is not random. It is training, dedication, and discipline. Every guard and horse works together like a team, each understanding the other. When you interfere, even unintentionally, you disrupt that harmony. His words painted a picture of the delicate balance required to maintain the parade, a balance that had been built and maintained over centuries. Some of the teenagers glanced at each other, whispering softly. One girl whispered, "I didn't think about how much training it takes or how careful they have to be." Another nodded, "Yeah, it's like everything has a purpose. It's not just for show." The officer, noticing their growing attentiveness, allowed a small pause, letting the teens reflect on the lesson he had imparted. His silence spoke as loudly as his words, giving them space to internalize the gravity of their actions. The officer's tone softened slightly, shifting from firm instruction to thoughtful guidance. "You have the ability to enjoy this place and learn from it, but it must be done responsibly. Take your time, observe, and respect the space, the horses, and the guards. Fun does not need to come at the cost of safety or respect." The teens listened, recognizing the wisdom in his words. They had been seeking excitement, but now they understood that appreciation required patience, care, and attentiveness. He stepped back slightly, giving them room to absorb the lesson. "I am not here to ruin your visit. I am here to make sure it is meaningful and safe. The choice is yours. You can leave with a momentary thrill, or you can leave with understanding, memory, and respect. Which would you prefer?" The teens were quiet for a moment, processing the question. Slowly, they realized the answer was clear. They wanted to remember this day not for mischief or near mistakes, but for insight, learning, and the rare experience of witnessing history up close. One of the boys, the one who had been teasing earlier, finally spoke with sincerity. "We understand now. We didn't mean any harm, but we got carried away." The officer nodded, a faint, approving smile touching his lips. "That is the first step, recognizing your actions and their impact. From there, you can make better choices. Remember this moment. It will serve you well in the future." The words were simple, yet profound, and the teens felt the weight of responsibility settle gently on their shoulders. The officer then demonstrated how to observe the parade respectfully. He pointed out the lines the guards maintained, the spacing between horses, and the signals used to communicate without speaking. The teens watched intently, some crouching slightly to get a better view, others holding their phones responsibly to capture moments without interfering. The officer's guidance transformed their curiosity into structured attention. Every glance became meaningful, every step deliberate. Tourists around them took note of the shift. A few whispered compliments to each other, appreciating the way the officer had handled the situation without anger, only authority and guidance. Families with children nodded, seeing the teens learn in a way that reinforced the importance of discipline and respect. The parade, once a background to casual exploration, had become a living classroom. The teens, for all their earlier mischief, were now eager students, fully engaged in understanding the history and responsibility around them. The sun moved lower, casting a warm light over the parade. The officer's instructions began to blend into the rhythm of the day as the teens continued to watch quietly. They no longer approached the horses too closely, no longer jostled for photos, and no longer laughed carelessly. Their attention was focused, their curiosity tempered by understanding. In this way, a moment that could have ended with frustration had instead become one of growth. The officer concluded the scolding with a final, firm reminder. Respect is not something that comes from fear or punishment. It comes from understanding. The rules are here to protect you, the horses, and the tradition. When you respect them, you honor history and ensure safety. Remember that. The teens nodded in unison, feeling the sincerity and gravity of the message. They had learned an important lesson, not through reprimand alone, but through calm, deliberate guidance. As the officer returned to his post, the teens lingered briefly, looking at the guards and horses with new eyes. They observed the grace, the discipline, and the calm authority that defined every movement. Their laughter, now quieter and more thoughtful, reflected understanding rather than mere amusement. The parade, with all its history and discipline, had left a lasting impression on their young minds, a memory that would be revisited not as a moment of mischief, but as a day of learning, awareness, and respect. By the time the sun reached its peak, the teens were fully engaged in observing the ceremony responsibly. Their previous energy had shifted from reckless excitement to attentive curiosity. They were learning not only about the guards and horses, but also about responsibility, boundaries, and the importance of respecting tradition. The officer had done more than scold. He had transformed their visit into an experience that would stay with them far beyond the afternoon. After the officer returned to his post, the teenagers stood quietly, the lessons of the past hour settling firmly in their minds. The sun had shifted, casting soft golden light over the parade, illuminating the guards and horses in a way that made everything look almost timeless. The teens had stopped thinking about taking selfies or joking around. Instead, they began observing, truly observing, the environment they had only lightly noticed before. Every detail seemed new, every movement deliberate, every sound carrying a sense of purpose. One of the girls, the one who had earlier been the most playful, whispered to her friend, "I never realized how much work goes into this. The guards, the horses, everything is so precise." Her friend nodded slowly, eyes wide as she took in the disciplined posture of a mounted officer, the way he held the reins and guided the horse with subtle movements. The teens were beginning to understand that what they had thought of as boring rules and ceremonies was, in fact, an incredible display of training, trust, and tradition. They moved slowly, trying not to disturb the flow of the parade. With each step, they noticed more. The guards, polished boots glinting in the sunlight, the careful spacing between horses, the subtle gestures exchanged between riders that ensured the parade moved seamlessly. Even the tourists around them seemed to fade into the background, as the teens' attention was captured by the living rhythm of the scene before them. Each moment became a lesson, each glance a glimpse into a world of discipline they had never appreciated. The boy who had been the most mischievous earlier suddenly crouched slightly to get a better view of the horse in front of him. He traced the horse's glossy coat with his eyes, marveling at its strength and calm demeanor. "I didn't know they could stay so still, even with all the people around," he said softly. "It's like they understand what's expected of them, like they know their job." The others nodded in agreement, their earlier laughter replaced by quiet awe. The officer's words echoed in their minds, reminding them that respect and observation mattered more than casual amusement. As they wandered further, the teens noticed small acts of care that they had ignored before. A guard adjusted a strap on a horse's saddle with precise, practiced movements. Another subtly shifted the reins to signal a change in pace. The teens realized that every detail was intentional, every gesture a part of centuries-old tradition. The parade was not simply a show. It was a carefully choreographed performance that required focus, patience, and partnership between humans and animals. One of the girls asked quietly, "Do you think they ever make mistakes?" A guard's steady voice carried across the parade for a moment, giving instructions to a rider nearby. The teens realized that even in perfection, mistakes could happen, and that attention and care were essential to prevent them. They began to appreciate the officer's earlier words even more, about rules, boundaries, and the importance of respecting both the guards and the horses. They understood that these rules existed to prevent accidents, protect tradition, and maintain harmony. The teenagers paused near a section of the parade where the horses were resting briefly. They watched the animals' movements, noticing the way their ears twitched, their eyes scanned the surroundings, and their tails swished gently. The teens were struck by the calm intelligence of the horses, and they began speaking in whispers, sharing observations and reflections. "They're amazing," one whispered. "They're so calm but strong at the same time." Another nodded, adding, "It's like they trust the guards completely." The group began reflecting on their own behavior, silently acknowledging that they had been reckless earlier. Their laughter had been loud, their steps careless, and their curiosity unchecked. Now they recognized that curiosity without respect could lead to unintended consequences. "I'm glad he stopped us," one boy said quietly. "We might have done something really dangerous without even realizing it." The others agreed, and for the first time they felt a genuine sense of gratitude toward the officer. His scolding had not been punishment, it had been guidance, steering them toward understanding. As they moved along the parade, the teens noticed tourists taking photos, some standing too close to the horses, others unaware of the rules. The group found themselves instinctively cautioning others, using gestures and whispers to prevent potential mishaps. "Watch your step," one girl said softly to a younger child nearby. "The horses can get startled if you get too close." It was a remarkable transformation, from reckless bystanders to mindful observers, now aware of the responsibility they carried not only for themselves, but also for the safety of others. The officer's presence remained a silent influence. Though he had returned to his duties, the teens could feel his authority and watchful eyes in the background. His firm yet calm words had shaped their behavior, encouraging self-awareness and reflection. They realized that discipline was not about fear or punishment. It was about understanding, responsibility, and respect. They had experienced firsthand how a simple intervention, when delivered with knowledge and authority, could create meaningful learning. The teens paused near a section where the guards were performing a ceremonial maneuver. The horses moved in perfect synchronization, guided by subtle signals from their riders. The teens watched in awe, noticing how every action was deliberate, precise, and coordinated. "It's like a dance," one girl whispered. "But not just any dance, a dance that's been practiced for years, maybe even centuries." The others nodded, realizing that what they had dismissed as routine was actually the result of immense dedication and training. The sun began to lower, casting long shadows across the parade, and the teens felt a quiet serenity settle over the space. They moved slowly, pausing to appreciate the discipline, the history, and the beauty surrounding them. Their earlier excitement had evolved into a deeper curiosity, one grounded in observation, reflection, and respect. Each teen seemed to carry a personal understanding, an individual connection to the lessons learned that day. As they continued walking, the teens reflected on the impact of the officer's scolding. It had been more than words, it had been a turning point. They now saw the parade as a living example of history and discipline, not just a tourist attraction. The horses were not props, the guards were not performers, and the rules were not arbitrary. Everything had purpose, everything had meaning, and they had been lucky to witness it firsthand. Some of the teens even began discussing the history of the horse guards and the importance of ceremonial traditions in London. They speculated about the years of training required for both guards and horses, imagining the dedication, practice, and patience needed to achieve such harmony. Their conversation flowed naturally, blending curiosity with newfound respect. What had started as casual observation had transformed into genuine engagement with history and tradition. By now, the teenagers were fully attentive, their senses attuned to the subtle rhythms of the parade. They noticed the quiet commands exchanged between riders, the gentle signals given to horses, and the unwavering focus of the guards. Each moment felt purposeful, each movement deliberate, and each interaction meaningful. They realized that they had been given a rare opportunity, not just to witness history, but to understand it, appreciate it, and learn from it. The teens paused one final time near the center of the parade, taking a moment to reflect silently. They understood that respect and curiosity could coexist, that rules were not limitations but guides, and that learning sometimes required listening, observing, and stepping back. The lesson from the officer had become internalized, and they felt a sense of pride and maturity that had not been present when they first arrived. As the afternoon drew to a close, the teenagers began to move away, their steps careful and deliberate. They glanced back at the parade one last time, observing the horses, the guards, and the disciplined harmony that made the space extraordinary. Each teen carried a personal understanding, a quiet respect, and a story that they would remember and share. The officer remained on duty, a silent guardian of tradition, ensuring that the parade continued safely and gracefully for all visitors. The experience had left a lasting impression. What could have been a simple visit filled with mischief and laughter had transformed into a profound lesson in respect, responsibility, and awareness. The teenagers had learned to observe rather than interfere, to appreciate rather than disrupt, and to respect rules that were designed to protect and preserve. It was a rare and meaningful encounter, one that combined education, reflection, and history into a single unforgettable afternoon. Even as the teens left the immediate area, the lessons lingered in their minds. They discussed what they had seen, sharing impressions and insights with a maturity beyond their years. The parade had become more than a place to visit. It had become a teacher, guiding them through history, discipline, and the quiet power of respect. The memory of the officer's words, calm yet firm, would remain with them, a reminder that understanding and respect were as important as curiosity and excitement. By the time the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over central London, the teens had walked away with more than souvenirs or photographs. They carried a lesson in responsibility, observation, and appreciation for tradition. They had witnessed the discipline of the guards, the elegance of the horses, and the authority of a professional who understood how to guide without anger. The parade had left its mark, shaping the way they would approach not just historical sites, but experiences, responsibilities, and life itself. As the afternoon slowly gave way to the early evening, the teenagers began their final steps away from the Horse Guards parade. The golden light of the sun bathed the entire square in a soft glow, casting long shadows that stretched across the cobblestones. The air was calm now, filled with the gentle sound of hooves clopping and the low murmur of visitors strolling through the parade. The teens moved slowly, savoring the last moments of their visit, each step quieter than before, each glance more deliberate and thoughtful. The group had changed. The boisterous laughter that had accompanied them earlier was now subdued, replaced by quiet reflection and soft conversation. They spoke in hushed tones, sharing impressions of the day and the lessons they had learned. "I didn't realize how much work goes into keeping everything perfect," one girl said, glancing back at a mounted guard who stood tall and still, his horse shifting gently beneath him. "It's not just a show," she added. "It's like a living story." Her friends nodded, each processing the experience in their own way. The boy who had been the most mischievous earlier admitted quietly, "I guess I never thought about how dangerous it could be, not just for us but for the horses too. I feel kind of bad for not taking it seriously at first." There were nods of agreement from the others. They realized that their earlier behavior had been careless, and that the officer's intervention had prevented potential accidents, teaching them a lesson they would carry for life. As they walked toward the edge of the parade, they noticed other visitors, tourists who were unaware of the rules or the history, getting too close to the horses or speaking too loudly near the guards. Without thinking twice, the teenagers began to act differently than they had at the start of the day. They offered subtle guidance, gesturing politely to keep others at a safe distance, whispering reminders to younger children. "Careful, the horses are sensitive," one of the girls said softly, smiling at a small child who had wandered too close. The teens had become mindful not only of themselves but also of others, demonstrating the growth sparked by the officer's firm yet calm guidance. The officer remained on duty, riding steadily along the parade, observing the tourists and the guards alike. Though the teens had finished their initial lesson, his presence still carried weight. They could feel it in the quiet authority he radiated, a reminder that discipline and respect were ongoing responsibilities, not temporary measures. It was not fear that held their attention, but admiration, understanding, and a newfound sense of responsibility. The group paused near a quiet corner of the parade, where the sun glinted off the polished leather of the horses' saddles. They took a deep breath, soaking in the sounds and sights around them. There was a calm energy here, a quiet dignity that contrasted sharply with their earlier playful chaos. One of the boys whispered, "I think I'll remember this forever." Not just the scolding, but everything. The horses, the guards, the rules, it all feels important now. The others agreed, feeling a shared sense of appreciation and respect for what they had witnessed. Their conversation turned to the history of the parade itself. They speculated about how long the traditions had been maintained, how many guards had stood in the same positions, and how the horses had been trained to remain calm amidst crowds and noise. Each new thought sparked another, and soon the group was engaged in a lively yet thoughtful discussion. Their curiosity had shifted from casual exploration to genuine interest, fueled by the lessons they had learned through observation and experience. As they continued walking, the teens noticed the subtle coordination required for the ceremonial maneuvers. Horses shifted in unison, guards communicated silently through gestures and posture, and the entire parade moved like a well-rehearsed symphony. It was mesmerizing. One of the girls whispered, "It's incredible, they're like a single team. Everyone knows exactly what to do." The others nodded, realizing that their own behavior earlier had disrupted that harmony, even if only slightly. They now understood the delicate balance required to maintain order, tradition, and safety. The sun began its descent toward the horizon, casting a warm, amber light across the parade. The teens paused one last time to observe the central guards, standing tall on their horses, perfectly still despite the movements and chatter of the surrounding crowd. Their posture, discipline, and unwavering focus left a lasting impression. The teens understood that these guards were more than ceremonial figures. They were symbols of tradition, patience, and commitment. Each movement, each command, each gesture was a testament to years of practice and dedication. The officer rode slowly past the teenagers once more, giving them a brief nod. It was a simple gesture, yet it carried profound meaning. The teens felt acknowledged, as if the officer recognized that they had understood the lessons he had imparted. They felt a quiet sense of accomplishment, not pride in mischief, but pride in having learned, adapted, and respected the space they were in. They had been guided from carelessness to awareness, from playful misbehavior to responsible observation, and the recognition from the officer made the transformation feel real. As they moved toward the exit of the parade, the teens began to reflect on the day as a whole. They thought about how easily curiosity could lead to unintended consequences, how rules were not arbitrary, and how respect was intertwined with safety, tradition, and understanding. "I think I get it now," one boy said quietly. "It's not just about listening. It's about noticing, thinking, and being responsible for yourself and others." The others nodded in agreement, realizing that they had experienced a lesson that extended far beyond the parade itself. The group's pace slowed as they approached the exit. They looked back one final time at the horse guards, and the horses. Everything seemed more majestic, more deliberate, and more meaningful than it had earlier in the day. They had arrived with laughter and casual curiosity, but they were leaving with respect, knowledge, and a sense of responsibility. The parade had not changed, but they had. They had been shaped by experience, guided by authority, and inspired by history. Even as they left, their attention did not wander. They continued to notice small details, the way a horse's tail swished, the careful balance of a rider in the saddle, the silent communication between guards. They reflected on how easy it had been to overlook these details before, and how much more meaningful the experience had become through observation and understanding. They recognized that respect was a choice, curiosity was a tool, and learning was a process that required attention and mindfulness. The teens began discussing how they could share their experience with others. They spoke about telling friends and family what they had learned, explaining the importance of observing rules, respecting tradition, and understanding the care that went into maintaining historical spaces. They realized that their experience could serve as an example to others, that knowledge, observation, and respect could transform a simple visit into a meaningful lesson. As they walked further away, the parade faded into the background, but the memories and lessons remained vivid. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across central London, as if marking the end of an important chapter in their day. The teens carried with them a sense of responsibility, not just for their own actions but for the awareness of those around them. They understood that respect was contagious, that curiosity could be guided, and that learning could happen anywhere, if one paid attention. The officer returned fully to his duties, ensuring that the parade continued smoothly and safely. The guards maintained their positions, the horses moved gracefully, and the tourists continued to enjoy the spectacle, unaware of the small but significant transformation that had taken place. For the teenagers, however, the day had been unforgettable. They had arrived as playful, careless visitors and were leaving as thoughtful, respectful observers. The parade had taught them lessons that extended far beyond its cobblestones and ceremonies. As the teens finally reached the exit, one of them paused and looked back once more. "I'll never forget this," she said softly. "Not because we got scolded, but because we learned something important. I feel different now." The others nodded in agreement, each carrying their own reflections and insights. The lesson was clear. Respect, awareness, and understanding were more valuable than laughter without thought, mischief without care, and curiosity without guidance. The sun set fully, casting a warm, golden glow over the city. The teenagers walked away from Horse Guard's parade, not as the same group who had arrived earlier in the day. They carried with them not only photographs and memories, but also a deeper understanding of tradition, responsibility, and the delicate balance of history and safety. The officer and the guards remained, continuing their duties, preserving the legacy of the parade, and ensuring that every visitor, whether young or old, could experience its lessons in the proper spirit. The group disappeared into the streets of London, but the lessons of the parade remained alive within them. They would remember the horses, the guards, and the officers' calm authority. They would recall the transformation from carelessness to mindfulness, from playful curiosity to thoughtful observation. And they would carry with them a respect for history, discipline, and the importance of understanding the world around them, lessons that extended far beyond the walls of the parade and into the paths they would follow for the rest of their lives.